you can just state your name for the camera and what you do.
Okay. My name is Jennifer Arseneault. I am a program coordinator at the Department of Conferences and Visitor Services with the University of Maryland. I work with all different kinds of events, mainly in our summer division. So that includes everything from athletic camps to professional programs, national conferences, and even just day and evening programs.
Okay, and how did you initially get started in the event planning business?
Well, this might answer a couple of your questions, but I started here as an undergraduate, so I kind of dabbled in a few of the different departments here on campus, such as dining services and resident life, and I eventually came to find conferences and visitor services. They were offering a summer opportunity, and we just actually wrapped up our interview process for all of our students, but I found them sometime early on in the spring of my sophomore year, and I count myself very lucky for that experience, only because it's led me here. You know, I'm here still 6 years later. But they provided me an opportunity to be an assistant program manager, which is a summer supervisor. So we work on a specific team of about 15 people, and then we run all different kinds of conferences, such as the ones that I spoke about earlier. So that's kind of how I dipped my toe into the waters of event planning. But of course, we do so much more than just event planning. We're here from the very beginning when we search out clients or they come to us, and then we are all the way through with them until the billing process, and then we try to bring them back next year. So it's a very long process, but very rewarding for sure.
Okay, and what kind of training or education did you receive for event planning?
So in this case, I probably went the unconventional route. I started here as an undergraduate, and I thought I wanted to be a veterinarian. So I was with animal science for quite a few years, and then I figured I'm not cut out for veterinary school, I'm not cut out for the medical field, and I'd much rather work with people that can tell me their problems versus animals that can't talk to me. So I searched around, and I found a few different majors that I thought would be interesting, and one of them was hospitality, but that wasn't an option here at the university. So I looked around at some other universities in the area, and the one that offers a 4-year degree in hospitality and tourism management was the University of Maryland Eastern Shore. But of course, I loved the University of Maryland College Park. I didn't want to leave. I was working here. I had friends here. So I didn't want to go all the way to the Eastern Shore. But they offer that degree for your junior and senior year over at the universities at Shady Grove. So after doing some research and then taking that big leap of faith, I jumped into that major, and it was very enlightening. The program is much more geared towards hospitality in the hotel industry, only because, the program is sponsored by Marriott and they have a heavy hand in what we do, but it taught me a lot about events as well. It was mandatory that every single person in the program, through your 4 semesters at the Shady Grove campus, you have to participate in the event planning process. So it was, while everything was more geared towards hotels and that sort of management, we were very fortunate to get the event planning experience, and everybody takes a turn in all the different aspects of it. So we prepare the food for the events, we do the upfront customer service, front of the house type work, we do all the management and the planning with the clients. So each management team is assigned a client, and then you have to work with all the different students that comprise the other parts of the event and make the event a success. So you're dealing with real money, real people, and you really have to make that event work, because all the events that we did were for the community. So it was very big, very important. And I was lucky enough to be the manager for one of the events that we had. So I was at the top. They knew that I had some event experience from working here with conferences, and they were like, you're going to be the perfect person for the job. So it ended up being a very successful event, and I'm very glad for it. But that was my first big foray into planning my own event, and it was scary but very exciting, and I think it very much prepared me for taking on a professional role here. So that's a lot of my experience in education, and that's the way that I went. But I'm so happy I got my degree from the University of Maryland Eastern Shore. And I wish it was offered here, but maybe one day. Cross my fingers.
So you kind of touched on this already about specializing in particular events, but is there any type that you prefer over the others?
When I started here as a student, I had much more experience working with the athletic camps. And of course, everything that I do here is in the microcosm of the university. So these types of events are very different than you might find in, say, a corporate environment. So I knew that wasn't exactly the world I wanted to go into. I'd had an internship with Kaiser Permanente in events, and while I really enjoyed it and it was very community focused, I knew that the corporate style and how strict it wasn't quite for me. Which is one of the reasons why I wanted to continue here at the university. Things are much more free and relaxed, and you can work a little bit more independently. But coming back to all that, as a student, I got to work with the athletic events, and I really appreciated those. And now that I'm in a more professional role, like we've restructured our department so that each person works on a different type of event. And while I do day and evening events now, and then I take on some of our long-term programs over the summer, I think one of my favorites was the athletic camps, because it's hard to explain without having seen it, but it's a very different type of event where it's almost all children that come to the event. So they stay overnight with us, and a lot of times this is their first time away from home. But they are from the ages of 7 to 17, 18. So you get a wide variety of people that are coming in. You get a chance to work with the kids as well as the parents. For the parents, this is a really big experience too. So this is their first time letting their little baby go off to college, and experiencing the residence hall life and the campus environment. So it's very exciting for the parents too. And it can be very stressful, but some of that stress on the day of, while some of it can be a little bit negative, only because people get really riled up in such large groups sometimes, it's very exciting. So having all of that energy was, it's kind of enough to pump you up throughout the day to get through the preparation and the check-in, and then kind of auditing everything that we have, and then releasing the group out into the campus. So I think that was probably one of my favorite things. I'd love to go back into that, but it'll probably take another restructuring of the department for me to get back into those.
Okay. You kind of touched on this already, how it was that you ended up with this kind of company, not
Department.
Yeah. So we already kind of touched on that, but growing up, were you really interested in helping with your own parties or for other family members?
For myself, I think I would count myself as maybe a little bit more introverted. But as I've grown, I think I can definitely switch it on and off, introverted, extroverted, depending on the day and what needs to get done. But as a kid growing up, I think on the more introverted side, I wasn't really into parties. I didn't ever want to be the center of attention. So I never was interested in planning anything like that for myself. But then as I got older, I was more interested in, throwing some of those surprise parties for friends, especially like the Sweet 16 kind of things. I know the boys weren't always quite so into it, so we had to like sneak them out into public and do fun things. But I enjoyed some of the planning of those types of activities, and as I've gotten older, it might not be the planning of, say, a party that I enjoy doing, but just as an example, I like planning like trips. So my sister and I just went to Italy, and it took months of planning to kind of get everything in a row, and I had to kind of bring in some of my experience here and that I've had with my internships and with my degree so that I could get everything in line, planned out ahead of time, so that by the time we got to Italy, we hit the ground running. So luckily my sister and I are very motivated people, so we were able to get things done in good time, but that was a type of event that I truly enjoyed planning, and I wish that I had more of a chance to do that, but part of my degree was in tourism, so that's one of the things that I really enjoyed about this Italy trip, because we got to research all the different cities that we wanted to go to, all the different types of museums and artwork that we wanted to see, and then just all the historical stuff that you could possibly find. So we were like, okay, well, we have to do this, we have to see that, we have to eat that. So I thoroughly enjoyed being able to plan a trip like that, and if I could maybe go into ecotourism one day, I think that would be amazing.
That'd be so cool. I actually studied abroad in Rome
last
semester.
Yeah. Great.
What is something about event planning that you think would surprise people?
That's a good question. I think one of the things that would surprise people is the amount of time, effort, and money that goes into it. And while that sounds sort of obvious, we have a lot of clients that decide, let me say, we have a lot of campus clients. So maybe another department comes to us and they're saying, well, we have this event that we want to hold for some 50 professionals in this building. We just need you to reserve the room. We'll do everything else. So they'll order their own catering. They'll handle the security of the event, the registration, transportation, any signage. But they quickly come to find that they've signed the contract with us to only reserve the room and then maybe provide some site supervision to keep things going properly during the event. And then later on down the road, they're like, we had no idea it was this much work. We have all this on our plate. We don't have time. Like, can you do the catering? Can you do the security? We're like, that's what we're here for. So I think it surprises people in the fact that they think all of these things are so easy and they should just be able to send a few emails and then kaput, everything will be done. They'll just pay for it and don't have to think about it until the event. But there's a lot of planning that goes behind some of those things, and everybody has their own job. So I know I keep bringing it up, but say like our catering group, they have 50 contracts on their plate at one time. And so it's a lot of coordination and a lot of time it takes to settle just one menu for one group, and then have everything paid for and then planned ahead of time. So while it does sound easy and it only sounds like a few things to tick off your list, it's a little bit more than you'd expect. And of course, there's the money aspect of it where they're tired of planning it on their own, so they come to us and then they're like, wait, but I could have planned it for $500. Why are you charging $700? It's because our time is being spent, and that's the money that we make off of, pouring our time and our effort into these groups and making them a success. So it's definitely the time, the planning, and the money that I think really surprise people when it comes to events.
Okay, and why should someone consider hiring an event planner rather than, like you said, try to do it themselves?
Well, again, that time and the money that's spent on having, one person in your office spend all this extra time doing an event for you when you could just have an event planner, it just doesn't make sense. Somebody that is trained in events, maybe has certifications for meeting planning, they've put all this work into their education and understanding the events field, that there's no point in having somebody that's untrained and that doesn't know how much time it's really going to take and how much time they're going to have to dedicate to something that's not technically their job. It can be very confusing and time consuming, and it just it doesn't seem feasible when you really work out the amount of time and what they're getting done. So I'd say just for those reasons alone, it's incredibly important to have an event planner that knows what they're doing and that's their sole job. And they can definitely maximize that for you. You don't want somebody that's inexperienced running all over the place and not, putting their full effort towards their actual job and then not putting their full effort towards the event. It'll definitely show. Things will come apart at the seams, and as a professional group, you never want to show your guests that things are falling apart. So having an event planner is incredibly important.
Okay. And this question was more geared towards, I think, like private companies.
Sure.
But I guess even for the department, how do you charge for your services? So is it by type of event? Is it by like an hourly kind of thing?
Mm-hmm. It depends what aspect of the event we're charging for. So generally with our events, we, for most things, we're just the middleman. So say another department on campus wants to have an elaborate conference with us, and they want to plan a trip off campus and they want to have catering for one of their events. We pull together all of those services for them. But all of those other campus providers, such as maybe Good Tidings Catering and the DOTS shuttle service, they have to charge money for those types of things. So say catering costs $500, we will get that charge and our department has to pay that. They're not charging that directly to the client. So part of the way that we make our money is that we have to add on certain fees or we have a contract with those certain departments where we get a cut of those profits. So that's part of the way that we make money. If we have on-site site supervision, for example, maybe in the Edward St. John building, because it's so new, we don't want random people going throughout the building when there's an event going on. We want to make sure that people are staying in the areas that they've reserved. So maybe we have a student staff member that has worked with us for some time. They'll go ahead and they'll wear their polo and their name tag. They'll monitor the area, make sure things are running smoothly, nobody's in the building that shouldn't be. But to have somebody there, that's money that our department has to pay for the student to, take the time out of their day to go supervise that. So we charge by the hour in that case. And then overall, because we can only add so much to the services that we're charging, we have to break it out in different ways. So we do usually have a program management fee of some kind, or an administrative fee, depending on the type of program that we're running. So in my case, if I'm running a day program and I know it's going to take me a certain amount of hours, or just a certain amount of time and effort, then we charge kind of on a tier basis for just a lump sum program management fee. So those are a handful of the ways that we charge to make money. Does that answer all of your questions?
Yeah.
Okay.
So what typically is the most expensive aspect of the event?
Ooh. Again, it kind of depends on the event. So if you are renting a space, say in the Xfinity Center, if you're renting the whole arena, or if you are maybe over in the Stamp Student Union and you're renting the Grand Ballroom, those space charges can be a bit high, or higher than what a client expects. So a lot of the times those are the most costly things. Everything else is kind of itemized and maybe a little bit smaller, just depending on the size of your event. But the bigger your event gets and the more space you need, the higher those charges can be. So that's probably one of the most expensive things that you have to think about when planning an event. If you're a huge event, say the PG County graduations, then you can afford that space. You're a whole county school system, paying for, that big arena. So the bigger the group, the more likely they are to be able to afford the space and to be able to afford to bring in quite so many guests. But location and the reservation of the space, very expensive. I'd say the second most is probably just having personnel. So the time to supervise the event can be pretty expensive depending on how big it is as well.
Okay. How long does planning one event typically take on average?
I hate to say it, but again, it just depends on the type of program. If you have a day program that's only going to be here for, say, 5 hours, maybe it takes you a week to put together the contract after you've gathered all the information from the client, send them an estimate, get the contract approved, send it out to the client, and then bring the contract back. All said and done, for such a small program, as long as they're not ordering catering for 500 people and then 30 registration tables and catering tables and easels and signs, then maybe a week or two. But if it's say 1,000-person group and they all want housing and half of them need transportation to DC for an optional visit and they all need a meal plan, something like that could take up to 2 years to plan. We have some of the programs that are coming this summer with us. They're staying for maybe up to 2 weeks at a time. They have 500 people. They're doing all these extracurriculars here on campus that we need to spend time coordinating for them, especially if it's an international group. We need to start that at least a couple months, if not over a year ahead of time, so that we get everything in order. And things are constantly changing, especially if you have a large event, maybe 800, 850 people, you want to start that way in advance, but come closer to the deadline, things are going to change. Maybe your registration numbers aren't as high as you thought come a couple months out, but then a month out, things kind of go up. So you need to have enough time to adjust the services that you're actually going to be contracting for. So depending on the type of program, it could be a week, it could be 2 years, so you just never know.
Okay, and the final question is kind of a fun one. It's, do you see yourself eventually starting your own event planning business?
The only detraction to that is that I love where I work so much right now. I think that working here on campus has been such a great experience for me, and it's, even just working in this department, it had led me to wanting to change my major, and I know that they use me as a poster child sometimes for that, just because I had such a great experience here, but I really did. I love what I do so much, and I love the programs that I am able to work with. But beyond that, I love this department. I love working on campus. It affords me a lot. And as a relatively recent graduate, like, I live very comfortably and I do something that I love. So at this point, I don't see myself leaving. And it's funny because a lot of the people that are in our director and assistant director level type positions, some of them have been here for 30 years. And beyond that, 25, 20, 15 years. People really love this department, and if you just look at how long each employee has been here, you can tell that everybody likes it. Nobody really wants to leave. So I would like to stick this out for as long as possible, but if I ever find that there is a great opportunity to be able to start my own business, I don't see why I wouldn't take it. I think that it's such a big push in my education in my last 2 years getting my hospitality degree was that you should be able to own your own business one day. They really pushed entrepreneurship on us. It came up in many of our classes. We had 2 classes specifically dedicated to it, where you have to write your own business plans. You have to come up with your own company and your own ideas. And while I came up with a restaurant at the time, I have this great business plan, and we had it all critiqued by local restaurateurs that are very successful. And with all that great feedback, I can certainly switch fields and take that information that I understand about a working business plan and how to run a successful business with a handful of employees and what that means for HR and the law aspect. I can mold that to what I need it to be to work in events and any type of hospitality. Again, maybe ecotourism. I always thought that was a fun topic. So like I said, if there's a good opportunity for it, I would love to take that later on down the road. But at this time in my life, I know that I don't have the that entrepreneurial spirit. You have to be such a go-getter, and you really have to be able to take risks, especially with money. And I'd like to build up my money a little bit more before I am going to take some risks with it. So that'll be probably the only thing stopping me now. But later on down the road, I would love to start my own business.
All right. Well, thank you so much for this interview.
Yes, of course.